Hey y'all, welcome back to the internet. This is Avery, and we are setting the scene, the virtual scene in Blender for our object. So we can add lights, we can change the background or make it transparent. We can add a backdrop that is seamless, and we can mess with the camera. So let's start with the lights first. So you can see in this scene I have 3 different lights. They're in my outliner, and they're all point lights. And to see the details or affect the details for these lights, to adjust them, you come to the Object Data Properties. And so that is a tab that appears and disappears or changes depending on what you have selected. So when you have a light selected, it looks like this little representation of a light. And you can see I can click on all of these, and they have different settings. You can change the color to whatever you want. You can up the wattage as much as you want. These are the things you probably want to mess with, the color and the wattage. You can also shift it to a totally different light right here in the Object Data Property. So I went from a point light to a sun, and you can see what dramatic effect it has. It actually, notice what happens? So the point light is below the shape, but then when it goes sun, it goes above, because, you can't have a sun below a thing. So that's, some of the settings that you have to grapple with or contend with in Blender using the sun, but you have a bunch of different options here, and so I'll let you play with them, but I'm going to leave it at point for now. To add a light, it's like you add anything in Blender. It's Shift-A to add, and then come down here to light, and then let's add another point. So it's going to add it right at my cursive. We can't see it right now, so I'm going to hit G and move it up with Z, holding Z to lock it along that axis, and now I have a new light in the scene. It's .003. Let's change this one to orange so you can really see it, and I'm going to up the wattage to, I don't know, say 1,000. Cool. So there's my new light. I'll hit the camera to go to my this camera icon to see my camera view, and then I'll just hit render really quickly. You can see what's going on. Beautiful, right? The other thing I want to show you is that you can change the backdrop. I mean, we've done that before, but you can change the sort of color of the world. So it's by default this dark to medium gray, and you can lighten it up, and you can shift some things. And now when I hit render, right, it's a different look, and maybe that's what you're interested in for your final image. But I also want to point out that you can add this color, but you can have it not be visible in the render. So in order to do that, you need it to be transparent. So come right here to the Render Properties, click on that, scroll down to the bottom, and you can see Film, if you can, is one of the tabs. Click on that, drop it down, scroll down a little bit, and you can see Transparent is an option. And notice, when I hit Transparent, the backdrop disappears, right? But the color of the backdrop is still affecting my object. Perfect! That's exactly what I wanted. So then I can go to Render, and I have this object without a backdrop. And if I render it out as a PNG, which it is set as, remember, if you come right here to the output properties, and the file format is set to PNG, and this is by default, but it has to have this RGBA, and A stands for alpha. If you are you rendering a PNG with an alpha channel? Alpha would be your transparency, which is represented here by these dark and slightly lighter gray squares. Then you can pull this into, say, Illustrator or Photoshop, and you can put a totally different backdrop behind it, or you can put text behind it. You can do a lot of different things. So you definitely want to render these out in PNGs if you are doing some type of transparency like this. So reminder, just real quick, because I'm going to click it off in just a second. You come down here to the Render Properties. It is under Film, and then it's transparent. Okay, so I just brought it back. The next thing I'm going to show you is how to add a backdrop, a seamless backdrop. So yes, we have an orange background, but what if we want a totally different colored backdrop that is seamless, which is a thing that you do in photography, right? Because when a wall meets a floor, you get that harsh 90-degree angle, or around 90-degree, depending on your contractor and how good they are at making things. That just is going to like hold light and cast really weird shadows, or just a sharp line. So we want it to be seamless. That's going to look super pro. So how do we add a thing? I'm actually going to go switch to the material preview, so you can see here. So you won't see the you get it. So I'm going to hit Shift A, right? How you add a thing to mesh, plane, and now I have a plane. It's kind of like in the middle of my shape, but that's fine. I'm going to hit S on my keyboard to scale it up. Remember, you can also hit use these keys over here. If they disappear, you can hit T on your keyboard. They probably won't disappear, but you can hit T on your keyboard to bring them back if they do. And you can hit scale. So that's another way to do it, to scale up that way. Let's see what's going on with the camera. If I click on here to toggle to the camera view, that's fine, but in order, I would have to have two seamless edges. So I'm going to actually grab my red handle and scale that out. So now I have this whole line going across my camera that is my red seamless background. But also now it's time to deal with this bisection that's happening. So I'm going to come to my move tool, move my plane down to right there, and actually I want to scale. You can see now we're good, but now I want to scale the whole thing up. And then let's click on my camera. So I hit S to scale everything up. Click on the camera. That's beautiful. So now we need to extrude one of these lines. This line right here, we need to extrude it up in the Z-axis so that we can have a wall. You dig it? I dig it. So we're going to have to do that in edit mode. So hit Tab or come right here and go to edit mode, right? Tab to object mode, tab, now we're in edit mode. And we want to just select that one edge in the back, that one line. So in order to select one line, we need to be in edge select mode. If you click right here, or you can hit 2, the number 2 on your keyboard, and then select the edge. It's selected. You can see it turns slightly lighter white. And then you could hit, say, for example, E, and just extrude it up and lock it along the Z-axis by hitting Z, and extrude up till it's out of the picture, or I'll hit Command Z. Or, with that edge selected, you can come here to the extrude, which is one of the tools that is in the object mode panel. And you have to make sure your line is selected, that edge is selected, but then you can extrude that jam up and make sure it's out of the camera view. That's really great, right? Really, really great. So we want to do a little bit more, though, because if I come back into this render, I'm coming out of object edit mode to go into object mode. I mean, that looks dope. You can see my light is very close to my floor. I mean, there's some cool things happening, but I want to get rid of this strange shadow that's going on here. So I'm going to hit Tab to go back into edit mode, and then I'm going to go to this material preview so you can see it maybe a little more clearly. And I'll zoom out here. So it's this line that is the perpetrator of shadow, and I want to bevel that out. So what am I going to do? I'm going to come here, make sure I have my selection tool selected, make sure that I'm on right here, edge select mode. I'm going to click on the edge, and then I'm going to bevel that jam out by clicking bevel, and then I get this nifty handle, and I can bevel it out, right? But wait, Avery, all you're doing is adding a plane. How does that add a bevel? We need to do a little bit more. So once you let go, you'll see that you have this menu box here that'll be all compact and stuff, and you need to expand it. And then you're going to add some segments. Boop, 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 boop. You don't have to go crazy. Boop, 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 boop. That's like crazy. So maybe you just need to do 10, and then when you come out of edit mode, click Tab to go into object mode. It's kind of hard to see now, but just make sure this thing is shaded smooth, the whole plane. So I right clicked and then hit shade smooth, and then let's come back to the camera view mode. We'll come back here to render, and you can see that I've just already smoothed out beautifully that plane. If you want to add a light to just kind of in a way make it totally disappear, let me show you that really quickly. We probably don't want to use a point light. We want to hit Shift A, and the light we want to add, I'm thinking, is this area light because it is a square. So I have my move tool already selected, so I can just move it up. You can see it's a square. I want to scale this up big time. I hit S, and actually I want to scale it along the X. So scale X, and then I want it to be smaller in the Y, so S, Y. And then I need to rotate it because I want it to just all that light to land on this seam right here. So R, I want to lock it along the X, so R, then hit the X key, and then click to make that happen. And now I want to check the object data property. So I'm going to come here to this light bulb, click it. 10 watts is way too low. I'm going to go to 500. And then let's take a look and see what this looks like. Cool, right? So you can see what the difference is if I make that go away versus if I add that in. So that seamless effect, and I can keep adding, power to this light and adjust its location to try and change how the wall and the floor, like how seamless it is. Just some fun stuff to play with. Okay, so we went over lights. We went over a backdrop. Now let's talk about this fake real camera that you have here. Oh my God, I'm so into this. Hold on, let me into this real quick. Oh, so you can see with cycles, I don't know if you all can see, but we have this grain, and it's kind of what I love about cycles. I love that kind of distortion that it does. That's your render engine. If you want to get rid of that, you can up the render cycles. So let's say if I go to 50, it's a little bit better, but it's still there. But if you want to use the computer to do some math to take care of some of that grain for you, you can come to denoising. You can go to render, click denoising, click the render denoiser right there, and then it's grainy, and now it's not grainy. I don't know if you all saw that, but it was like a bit of magic that happened right there. So it will denoise that grain texture out for you, but I like it. So I'm going to leave it in. The other thing I want to point out before we move on to the last bit of the camera is, y'all, this needs to be 1080 by 1080, or it doesn't need to be, but that's what will be for this. So make it big. That's taller than an HD television, but as wide as an HD television, right? 1080 by 1920. Nope, as tall as an HD television, but not as wide because they're 1920 pixels wide. But who cares? We're all going to be doing 92K soon. Anyway, let's add some depth of field to this. So we're in our camera view right now. Let's actually click on our camera. Click. And now we're going to mess with the camera settings. So remember, the icon changes. We're going to go to the icon. And the thing we want to add is depth of field. And we're going to make sure we can see the limits. So if you come, after you click depth of field, come to viewport display and click limits. And this, let me rotate the camera. And actually I'm going to switch to this so it moves a little bit quicker. This is where the center of the focus is. So if you know about depth of field, which I'll show you right now, it essentially has to do with the size of the aperture. And I'm not going to go over all of this, but when your aperture is small, it's a very narrow depth of field, so things are out of focus. That's what this is representing right here. This is an f1, f-stop for the aperture. And so it's letting in more light, that's right here, but it's also more difficult to have a range of focus. So it's just this one little character. But when you're narrowing your aperture, so that would be like f22 is a very narrow aperture versus f1 is a very big aperture, you have a much larger depth of field, and so most everything is in focus. That's great. And in the real world, they're like totally limitations because if you have an f52 aperture and it's very small on your camera, then you're going to need a ton of light. Really bright day or really long exposure, and if things are moving anyway, it gets complicated. But we can do some crazy stuff, like for example, one of the fastest lenses out there is this f.95, and it costs $13,000. But we don't have to worry about that because in Blender we can add a camera that has, an f-stop of 0.1, and we don't have to pay a cent for it. So this is how we can get depth of field, an extreme depth of field in our image, and I'll show you what that looks like. So if I click on my camera, you can see nothing's in focus now. Everything got blurry because my depth of field is so minuscule, which is the range where, this area where things are in focus. So I need to adjust my limits, and I think I can still do it here. Yeah. To adjust the limits, you can actually grab this thing. It's selectable, but I can also do it right here with this slider. Sorry, no, right here with the distance slider. So you can see what's going on, right? Cool. And you can see it touches the object. And now to give you more of a visual. So I have, let me render this so you can see. I have things that are in focus in this one object, in this one photograph, and things that are out of focus because of the depth of field. Cool, right? So this is, in focus. Don't mind the grain, and then this is out of focus. So depth of field, you see it in like macro photography, you see it in portrait photography a lot. It is a choice, a stylistic choice, and you can play with that. So again, when you have your camera selected, you come to the Object Data Properties tab, click on Depth of Field. If you want to see where your focus center is, you can click on Limits and mess with it that way. 60 minutes, we're almost done though, because the last thing that I want to show you. Oh, I remember. All right. Well, first, you can change your backdrop. So once you have your plane, which is now your backdrop, which maybe we just want to call it backdrop, you can change the color of it. So, come down here to Material Properties tab, add a new material, change the color to, say, blue, and you can see blue. And then, with a principled BSDF, which is by default, you can change the roughness, make it really rough and have kind of less glossy feel, or super glossy, and you can see it reflects the object, and it's also reflecting this light that I have in the scene. So kind of weird, but maybe this is the weirdest you need. You can also see that. Look at all the lights. I mean, it's kind of dope. I almost want to render it out, but I'm not going to. I'm going to keep moving on. The last thing, I just want to remind you that come here to the output properties to the render properties. Is that it? Yes. Sorry, yep. Render properties. Come here to render properties, and this is where you can adjust the color. So if the colors look a little off to you based off of what you selected in the slider bar, say like here, if it's not, that doesn't quite look like that, you can come into render properties, set the color management. By default, it will be in filmic, which is just Blender's interpretation of color in a filmic style, but you can just do standard. And you can see, it's sort of subtle, but it is, a shift in the way color is represented. So standard versus filmic in the color management in the render properties. All right, that's about 18 minutes, 19 minutes. I'll be able to cut out a little bit, but I hope that was really informative for you all. I miss you. I love you. Bye. No, I don't mean to say that. I'm going to cut that out.